Hello everyone, Dolphin Oracle back tonight. I've booted my Windows XP virtual machine into an MX live session. This is running live off of the CD image. I can do that in MX. It's just like booting off of a CD that you might have burned and restarted your computer on. So a lot of times what people want to do when they want to try Linux for the first time on systems, they don't want to throw away their old operating system. They want to dual boot. So what I have here is I have Windows XPs on this system, and I'm going to use MX to set up for dual configuration. Now I could do this from the installer. I don't always recommend running it from the installer, but you can run the partition tool right in the installer and repartition your drives so that you can install MX. I like to do this without the installer running. I don't know. I'm kind of old school that way. I like knowing what my partitions are before I get started. So I'm going to come down here to System and gparted. Gparted is the I believe it's GNOME Partition Editor is what it stands for. Doesn't matter what it stands for. It's the partition editor. It's just like running something like Partition Magic or something like that. So password for root in the live session is root. Very easy. It's just like the administrator account in Windows 7. And you can see that here is my one Windows partition on my 20 gig hard drive. This 20 gig hard drive is very similar to one you might have in an old, very, very early Windows XP laptop. I have a Sony with 512 megs of RAM that came with a 20 gig hard drive. So what we're going to do, we're going to select the partition, and we're going to resize the partition. We'll do a right click and click resize. Now XP, this is going to tell you that you can shrink it down to 8.5 gigabytes. That's because my XP partition is taking up about that much space. You only need about 6 to install MX in a test environment. My main operating system environment is only running 20 gigs. So, but for purposes of this video, it doesn't matter how big you make the partition. But for me, I don't have a lot of space on my hard drive, so I'm going to make it I'm going to shrink this down to about 10 gigabytes for the XP partition, and 10 gigabytes, give or take a little, for the next partition. So that's the first thing that's going to happen, is we're going to resize that partition. Now we need to make a new partition. Again, right click, click new, and I'm going to make this an extended partition. It's going to use all the space. Click add. Okay. Now in the new partition, if you're back from the MS-DOS stage, you used to have to do all this with the fdisk command. This is much friendlier than the old fdisk command. So I need a new logical partition in the extended partition, and I need about 6 gigabytes for MX. And what I do? I think my touchpad's gone berserk. There we go. Need about 6 gigabytes for the MX partition. I don't know, that looks fine. And then this gives me around 4 gigabytes left over that I can use for Linux swap. New, and we're going to say, instead of ext2, we're going to scroll down here until it says Linux swap. Click add. Now we have 2 new partitions we can install MX into. Now one thing you need to know about the gparted editor is that you haven't actually done anything yet. This is just setting up the steps. We have to hit the check mark to apply all the operations. Now before I click apply, a word about backing up. You've heard it here from me first. We're messing around with partition tables on your hard drive. If you've got real data that you need to save for the future, you need that backed up on an external drive, CDs, I don't care what, in the cloud, because every time you mess around with your hard drive partitions, you do run the risk of data loss. I've done it millions of times. Well, maybe not millions, but maybe hundreds of times, and I've never had a problem except once. And I was extremely happy that I had all my photos backed up on my server instead of just sitting here on my laptop, because I could get them all back. Okay, you've been warned. So apply changes all the partition tables. It's going to do its thing. It may not take too long on my virtual hardware. The resize operation could take a long time on real hardware, especially if you have really big drives or a whole lot of data to resize. Now, one thing that's going to happen in the live session is when you repartition the drives, there's going to be you repartition your drive into multiple sections. Each of those sections is going to show up as another drive to the file manager, and the file manager tries to open them and display them. This authentication is not gparted asking for it. It is actually the file manager wanting to mount the drives. Just click cancel, or you can type in the root password to mount them. It doesn't matter a whole lot, but when you run the installer, you'll want them unmounted. I'm going to click cancel because it just doesn't matter. I don't need to mount the drives. All partitions successfully completed. Click close. It's going to do a new scan and show us our new drives, and here they are. So here we are. Now I'm going to show you the some highlights from the installer. So let's go ahead and close gparted. We'll click on the installer. And this is correct, SDA, that's the name of the disk, but we want to do the custom install on existing partitions now. And you want to make sure you select the correct one. Remember, it was SDA 5 in this example. Your drive designation is probably going to be a little different. Swap, none are existing. Well, I'm going to select the one, but it would have picked it up automatically if I didn't. File system type, ext4 is good for a default, and if you're just starting out with Linux, just stick with that, it's safe. Click next. It's going to reformat the partitions, that's normal, and it's going to go to town. I'm going to stop here until it's done copying the files over to the disk, and I'll show you some information about the bootloader. Okay, now the installation of all the files is complete. We're moving over to the bootloader. Now all operating systems have a bootloader. In the Windows world, they largely hide it from you, but it is there. If you ever had to boot into safe mode by pounding on F8 when you had to boot into Windows, and you got a special menu, you've seen a glimpse of the Windows bootloader. MX-14 is no different. It has its own bootloader, and it's called Grub. And we install Grub onto the MBR. That's the master boot record of the installation device. In our case, it was SDA still. We're going to install the MBR, install Grub for MX-14 and Windows. Yes, you will be able to boot back into your Windows partition using this dual booting technique. So click Next. The defaults are fine. If you want to check out some stuff here in my installation video, feel free. I describe some of these items. Otherwise, check out the MX documentation or put up a post to the forums in case you have any questions. You want to use good passwords for your root account. It doesn't hurt for your default user account either. We'll check auto login because I'm the only user. It's going to create the accounts, and again, root is just like the administrator accounts from Windows. You're finished. We're going to reboot now, and I'm going to show you what you get when it reboots. If you're using a CD, it will tell you to remove the CD, and there it is. To remove the CD, press enter. And here we are in the MX boot menu. Now MX, that's the default option. That's going to boot into the new system, the installed system. If you look down here at the bottom, Windows XP, it is still there. Just to prove it. Now it's going to run the file system check, I think. And there we are. It's going to reboot into the MX. And there you go. You're ready to dabble in the world of Linux with MX-14, and you still have the safety net of your Windows XP install. For tips, tricks, how-tos, head over to mepuscommunity.org/mx or put up a post at forum.mepuscommunity.org. This is Dolphin Oracle signing off. Have a great night.